Hi, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
Is the seat taken?
Hey, Kiernan.
Did you hear I put a little new spin on it? Like as if I was approaching you.
Yeah, it was a little creepier than usual.
I thought it was more affable. I was going for affable.
Yeah.
There is something about, I feel that you and I both, when we try for affable, we come off as creepy. Have you ever noticed that? That's like an ongoing problem.
This is why I never try to be affable.
And in job interviews, when they ask your greatest weakness, you can't say, well, I come off as creepy, even if that's true.
Well, no, my greatest weakness is I care too much and I work
I work too hard. I actually have a great answer that is a real answer, which is I have no poker face. I can't, if I'm in a meeting and I disagree with an idea, it's written all over my face and my body language, and I have no poker body.
Yeah, I've been in those meetings with you.
You have, but I usually agreed with your ideas.
Yeah. I'm talking about some of the other folks.
Sure.
Yeah.
Who should we name them?
No, we should.
I mean, at this point, how many of them are dead? We haven't worked together in like 10 years.
That's.
What year did you leave the agency we worked at together, Blue State?
I think it was 2014.
God, I stayed for like 2 more years without you. I forget that.
That's a long time. Yeah.
Did you ever work in the new office?
No,
No. Oh, you left when we were still fresh and young.
Yeah. But it's still going strong. So they didn't need us, I guess.
Well, I wouldn't say that. They just found others. Now, Ryan, I'm very excited for today's episode. I married a classics major, and it's kind of shocking to me. You're the lead on this episode. Today, can you tell us who you're going to be speaking to?
Yes, we are talking to Laura Coffey, who is a travel writer who wrote a book called Enchanted Islands, Travels Through Myth, Magic, Love, and Loss, about her time traveling around some of these islands that might have inspired the Odyssey.
And so, of course, this is timely, and I have not seen the Odyssey movie yet, but I take it as preparation for the interview. You probably have.
Well, I have to confess, I saw it regardless of the interview.
Sure.
we got our tickets like 6 weeks ago, so we could see it in.
Was it sold out?
Oh yeah, it's sold out everywhere. Yeah,
epic.
I think it opened at like 240 million globally. It's a huge hit, biggest live action hit of the year.
It's interesting. I feel the director, he's kind of the only, I feel like he's the only director who like people just buy in. He'll go see anything he makes.
He really has become like a superstar.
What's it? Christopher Nolan? Is that it?
Christopher Nolan.
Thank you.
I'm old, and I back in like 1998, I went to the Rehoboth Beach Film Festival, which still happens near my hometown, and I saw a little black and white movie called Following. From this new director, and it was Christopher Nolan's first feature.
Wow. And did you like it? Did you say this guy's going to be a rocket ship?
I thought it was super cool and really interesting. And so, a couple years later when he came out with Memento, I was already like, okay, this guy's got something special.
I had that experience with a movie when I was in high school, and it was called Death to Smoochie. Do you know the movie Death to Smoochie?
That's a Danny DeVito film.
Danny DeVito film, and Ed Norton and Robin Williams play competing children's show hosts, but it's a really dark comedy, and the mob is involved. And I love that movie, and I thought this thing is going to be huge, and it was not. It was a flop.
Yeah, but it's a cult hit.
Like it is a cult hit, and it's so good. Oh, I love it. I love it. I've always thought it would be a great Broadway show. Yeah,
and Edward Norton is in this movie right now. I'm seeing next week the Invite.
That's supposed to be great.
Yeah. I'm excited about that. Good time to go to the movies right now.
All right. Well, listen, are you willing to give a little bit of a review? And if so, I mean, God, it's a pretty old poem. I don't think we need to say spoiler alerts, but you tell me, are you going to get into specifics enough that we have to forewarn people if you want to go into the Odyssey without knowing what happens? Don't listen.
Yeah, I think we can be spoiler free enough.
Okay,
I won't give
sure.
away the ending. The Odyssey is a tale of a man, Odysseus, and basically he is a warrior and a king of a small nation state called Ithaca, not in New York. This is again in the Greek islands, and he is in this battle for Troy that with the famous horse, and the
The
horse,
Trojan
the
horse, I'm aware.
Trojan.
Yeah.
Yeah,
My high
exactly.
school were the Trojans. That was our mascot,
The
which
losers.
is ironic because the Trojans are the ones who lose.
Yeah, your high school is not good at sports, I
We
guess.
were good. Listen, what all I know is we were good at marching band.
And that's what the Trojans are known for, and that's
Yeah.
um and basically he helps to win that war, and then he goes on this really long trip to get home where the gods and fate sort of conspire against him, and he has to be cunning and clever to get home, and it's there's a lot of famous moments. There's this incredible scene where his they get trapped in a cave and they have to do battle with a cyclops to get out of there. And Christopher Nolan is a filmmaker who appreciates practical effects. So
Yes.
while there is definitely some CGI in the movie, he went out of his way to really film as much as he could, like in with real soldiers and real boats. And
A
the
real
cy-
Cyclops.
the funny thing is, Kieran, that the Cyclops isn't CGI; it's a massive puppet.
Wow.
Yeah. So he goes all out, and he really made the soldiers go inside that little Trojan horse, and Matt Damon's been talking about how freezing it was
Oh,
in
interesting.
there. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's a big epic 3-hour film. It's very exciting. There's a lot to look at.
Did it
Uh,
live up to your expectations?
I think it came pretty close.
Wow. Okay.
I certainly wasn't disappointed.
Where was it lacking?
And this is tough because it's because it's so episodic. It's kind of hard to build like the momentum of the story, because
Hmm.
we're going from like kind of weird encounter to weird encounter.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think it mostly lives up to what people want. I think the cast was awesome. And if
I
anything,
thought I have to say, I thought the cast. Again, I haven't seen it. Okay, I have two more major questions. One is how violent is it? Because Catherine is resisting going because she thinks, especially the end, is probably a bloodbath.
yeah, well, the end is famously a bloodbath. It is violent, but it's rated R. But I feel like with just a few cuts, it would have been PG-13. Like
Okay, and
it's
is the bloody violence limited enough that you could just turn away at those moments and still enjoy the movie?
Yeah, there's only a handful of like really violent scenes.
Okay.
Specifically, the homecoming is the one of the most violent scenes in the movie. And I had just seen a movie that came out last year called The Return, which was an indie film with Ray Fiennes, who played Odysseus, and it just covers that last.
Oh, interesting. I've not heard of
Yeah,
that.
yeah, it's quite good.
My
So
other
I
major question with the Odyssey is the stars are so big. You have Matt Damon, Anne Hathaway, and Tom Holland. Was that not distracting? Could you actually like see them as the characters?
Well, Tom Holland's always distracting, but so
Yeah,
is
yeah,
Fall.
yeah. Okay, all right, everybody. Ryan, let's see. You need to take a break. Come back to the mic.
No, I think it doesn't really pull you out. You've got Zendaya kind of floating around occasionally. And oh God, the actor's name I always forget, but he's in this terrific movie called Yesterday, where he's the only guy who remembers the
Oh, the
Beatles.
Beatles. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so he's in that, and someone made a funny joke. It's like, this guy's only in movies where nobody knows who the Beatles are.
That's good. That's very funny. Okay, so the Beatles do not appear in
No,
the movie.
no, no, no. And in fact, Nolan, when he did the orchestrations, he wouldn't allow composer to use an orchestra, he had to use items that would have been available to the people then. So
Wow.
the soundtrack is very interesting and authentic and big.
You're selling me on it. And so do you feel like it inspired, I mean, given that this interview is coming up, do you feel like it inspired your wanderlust to go to this part of the world?
I mean, I've never been to Greece.
Sadly, I also have never been to Greece.
Yeah.
That's one of those trips that I feel like we're banking for with the kids when they're older. Because I
Yeah.
want them. Charlie actually loves myth and classics, and actually, my last stop's going to be related to something a cool way to learn about the Odyssey that I'd recommend that we do with him. And I feel like once they're sort of inculcated with the story and the myths, it's going to mean more to them when we travel there.
Oh, definitely, definitely. I was thinking about my history with the Odyssey, and when I was in school in the '90s at Catholic school, we loved Roman and Greek myths and history, and I feel like we spent a lot of time on that. And so I was familiar with the Odyssey from books written for younger readers. Like I think there was I think the series was called The Great Illustrated Classics.
Mm.
Um, and so that I've been familiar with the Odyssey for a long time, but I haven't sat down and read the full poem since I was in high school. So
Oh, there's so many thought pieces out right now about which translation to
I
read. And
know.
okay, if you've read the Odyssey, here's 20 other books that are all about the specific the specific stories of individual characters and riffs on it. And we're just like flooded with these right now. The Times is doing, they have like, just like they had one reporter who like only wrote about Hamilton for like 6 months. I feel like that same guy got assigned to, okay, everything about the Odyssey, make it new.
Yeah, I think the Odyssey has really captured people's imaginations again. It's one of the best selling books on Amazon. Multiple copies of the Odyssey. So
Wow, I hope Homer's cashing in.
Homer. That I mean, maybe we'll get to this in the interview, but Homer clearly didn't exist.
Probably a group of people, but also
Yeah,
shared over time. I don't know if I
yeah.
would say clearly didn't exist.
Hundreds of years of oral tradition.
Are we getting back to you and Tom Holland here? Well, right on that note, I do. Before we jump into the interview, I also just want to mention we got a great new review on Apple Podcasts. Much, much appreciated. This is from Biggie 106. Just like the Odyssey, we're doing a timely episode here. We got subject line was just World Cup, 5 stars. Love the World Cup coverage. So, it's good that we do this chat. For all the people who don't like the chat at the beginning of the episode, Biggie 106 felt it was good. And good on you, Ryan, for pitching that we do that where to travel during the World Cup episode.
Yeah, I thought that was a lot of fun. It was a really good episode. Yesterday, I went to fancy brunch at the JW Marriott, and they were projecting. They had multiple projections of the Spain Argentina final, and it was very exciting to watch with a bunch of folks who were all rooting for Spain. Weirdly enough,
Oh, they must have been very pleased.
they were very pleased. It was a long, tough game, but yeah, the World Cup was really cool. There was a thing called the Cup of America, which will happen in 2029, which is basically LATAM's version of the World Cup, where all the Latin American countries. And so that's going to be the next huge soccer thing that will happen down here in Bogota. Oh, and I should tell you something exciting. I got my Brazilian visa approved.
Oh my God, guys! Anyone who's not a longtime listener will not understand how big this announcement is because Ryan once tried to go to Brazil and was stopped at the airport en route because he had not realized he needed a visa.
Yeah, they let me fly there without a visa, but they did not let me enter. So now they said to bring 2 copies. I'm bringing like 6 copies.
Sure, you need 6. And remember, this is a hot tip. I haven't given it in a long time. Always print things out. Don't just show the screen. There's something about having paper that makes it feel more official.
Yeah, they definitely say print it out. And also, I learned that to re-enter Colombia, I need my yellow fever vaccine.
Oh, I love that vaccine. It's one of my faves because you get the special yellow card that you get to carry around inside the passport.
Well, stupid me, I don't have my card with me. So this week I have to go get another yellow fever vaccine. So I'm going to
Wow.
be very
You should get a
vaccinated.
punch card. Maybe get your third free. All right. I feel like our upfront chat is running longer than the reviews generally say it should, right?
Yeah.
So, but let me say also, please leave a review. It's very helpful for discovery of the podcast. 5 stars if you would, and contribute your ideas. Tell us what you like. Tell us some constructive criticism. We do look to it for inspiration, or you can always do it privately by emailing us at outofoffice@gmail.com. No, outofofficepod@gmail.com.
Definitely. Well, yeah, let's jump into the interview with Laura Coffey.
Well, just like the last episode, I want to remind you it's not called the jump in, it's called the takeoff.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
Welcome, Laura, to Out of Office. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Ryan.
So everybody is talking about the Odyssey right now. It's a huge movie out by Christopher Nolan. The original poem, multiple translations are on the Amazon Top 100 list, and I was really curious to try to find someone to come on the pod who'd gone on a similar Odyssey, and that's when I came upon your book. So I'd love to hear a bit about your history with the Odyssey and what got you so interested to go on the journey we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. Homer is very hot this summer, thanks to Christopher Nolan. And it was something I picked up a copy of Emily Wilson's translation of the Odyssey just before lockdown. And I had it on my bedside table for ages and kind of hadn't got round to it. And then started reading it and found it kind of this wonderful escapism. It was a pandemic. Everyone was stuck at home in lockdown or sheltering in place. And there I was reading about this epically flawed Greek hero who was sailing around the world, having this extraordinary adventures, visiting all of these incredible islands. And what was interesting to me was at that time, the world was a kind of strange and static and frozen place. And in the Odyssey, of course, it's all about movement and journey and the attempt to get back home. And while we were stuck at home, it was just a very interesting juxtaposition to the situation I was in. And I found Emily Wilson's translation incredibly accessible. She's the first translation into English by a woman. She's a professor at Penn University in America, and it's extraordinarily easy to read. She's taken away all the sort of overwrought insertions over the years and stripped it back to this very plain reading, very simple and beautiful poem.
And in the show notes, I'll link to a couple interviews she's done recently about her process and what she thinks of the movie. But that's it's funny. I lost my mic stand, so I have three books that are holding my mic up right now, and one of them is her translation of the Odyssey. The other is the Count of Monte Cristo because it's very big, so it works well as a mic stand.
Good choices. Good choices.
Why do you think the story is resonating so much today?
So why does it resonate so much today? Well, of course, you've got this famously flawed hero at the center. Odysseus isn't a perfect hero. He is stubborn. He is manipulative. He is the guy that came up with the Trojan horse that won the war. So he's very clever. He's very sneaky. And this is what endears him to Athena. So we've got a character at the center of the story who is flawed. And that makes him more universal, I think. And then we've got these kind of epic struggles with gods and the fates. And I think what's interesting about the Greek myths is they were famously, of course, I think the inspiration behind the Marvel universe of superheroes. And I like to think of them as the earliest version of self-help books. So Joseph Campbell, who famously wrote about the hero's journey, says that we should read a myth as showing us how to find our way through life. We'll have these obstacles, we'll have these unexpected allies, and we'll have to navigate through. And I think that's part of the reason that it's so enduring. And of course, with Christopher Nolan's film, it reaches a whole new audience because he has made it very accessible, the same way that Emily Wilson has, by kind of stripping it back to its essentials. I mean, it's still a 3-hour-long film, but it's I think a really good rendition of the poem.
Yeah, I think this has really captured folks' imaginations, and I can tell from your accent that I don't think you grew up in the States, but in the States we read the Odyssey and the Iliad, and we study Greek mythology a lot in middle school. Is that something that you all do as well?
Yeah, I didn't formally study. I'm not a classicist, so I didn't formally study the Odyssey in
Well,
school.
I was in seventh grade, so I wouldn't say I formally studied it
The
either.
bar is high. The bar is high. But we did, of course, study the Greek myths, and all children, I think, are very captivated by the Greek myths and these kind of incredible characters, the soap opera of the gods, and the idea that gods can be kind of petty and vengeful and hold grudges, and they're very dynamic stories, I think. So kids absolutely love them. So I read this Emily Wilson translation of the Odyssey during the pandemic, and then when it was legal to travel again, decided to go to the Aeolian Islands in Sicily. And they are, of course, named for Aeolus, the god of the winds, the guardian of the winds. And so that felt like serendipity somehow. And I hadn't quite realized that there was these theories of scholars across the ages who were trying desperately to work out which islands had inspired Homer, which is, of course, a kind of compelling madness in a lot of ways, because how can you find imaginary islands in the real world? But they did their best, and they had lots of different theories, and they all squabbled with each other, and they all cancelled each other in various 19th century ways. And one of the theories was that the Aeolian Islands were, in fact, where Aeolus, the god of the winds, lived. And this is the part of the Odyssey where Odysseus goes and they have a month-long feast there, and the god gives him a bag of the winds tied up inside it, and a good breeze to blow his ship home. And just when they're in sight of Ithaca, just when they're in sight of the home island that Odysseus is desperate to get back to, the crew open the bag thinking it's full of gold, and of course unleash the winds, which blow the ship all the way back. And these islands, the Aeolian archipelago off the coast of Sicily, was thought by Strabo, who is the father of geography, really, in the 5th century BC. He thought that Aeolus lived on one of them. So that was the starting point for my own journey, which was retracing parts of the Odyssey. And he thought that Aeolus lived on Stromboli, which is a volcanic island. There's 7 of these little islands in the archipelago. And Stromboli is one of the world's most active volcanoes. It's called the lighthouse of the Mediterranean. And you can walk up this volcano. You start in the late afternoon, and by the time you get to the top, it's dark. And you're seeing these fire darts from the volcano kind of against the night sky, against these beautiful stars. And you can hear the sea lapping at the foot of the volcano far beneath you. And it feels incredibly elemental. It feels like a place that a god could live. And so that's really where my journey started, and then unspooled into this sort of accidental odyssey, really, retracing some of the theories, the more bonkers theories, actually, of where these imaginary islands that Homer talks about in his poem, where they might be located in the real world, places where geography and mythology collide.
So you visit this island, and then you get the idea to try to find more of these islands connected to the Odyssey story.
Yeah, that's right. So I ended up then from there I went back to mainland Sicily. And Sicily is associated in lots of the theories with the island of the sun god, which of course is where the inciting incident of the whole Odyssey happens. So the reason that Poseidon's so annoyed with Odysseus is that his crew land on the island of the sun god, and he's warned not to eat the sacred white oxen that belong to Helios, the god of the sun. And for a while they resist, but then their food starts running out. They can't leave the island. The wind's blowing in the wrong direction. And so eventually Odysseus goes away to pray and leaves his men unsupervised and comes back to them having a barbecue.
They have a lot of barbecues in the.
They have a lot of barbecues. There's a lot of food in the Odyssey, and in fact, I talk a lot about this. I've got a talk that I give about the gourmet journey through the Odyssey, because there's lots of eating and drinking, and you eat and drink good things and bad things. There's lots of drugged wine and spiked drinks, and if you eat the wrong thing, the consequences are bad. And the consequences in this case were that all the crew essentially died. They were punished for eating these very sacred oxen.
So, and that's around Sicily. So I'm just curious, sort of practically, is this a trip that you're taking, in one big swoop, or are you doing this in parts? Like, how are you getting back and forth to these various places, and are you trying to follow any sort of specific, are you trying to follow the book at all in the direction that you're going?
Not really. It all unfolded in this kind of quite serendipitous, organic way. So I did set out to go to the Aeolian Islands. I set out for a 2-week holiday, and I planned to visit Sicily. And nonetheless, it was a strange time to travel, of course, because not many people were moving at that time. And it was a sort of, as I said, a static time in the world. So I got to meet the different islanders. And the same way that Odysseus meets an eccentric cast of people, he meets monsters and allies on the islands. I met a sex therapist on the island of Cortula, which was associated with Miette, which is Calypso's island. I met a character in the book called Naked Andrew, who was an expat, a British nudist on the island of Minorca, which is associated with the island of the Cyclops, the one-eyed monster. And I met a series of people that at that time, which was a panicked time in the world, were incredibly generous and incredibly welcoming and incredibly hospitable. And so it was a time of loneliness in lots of ways, and then also a time of deep connection with strangers. And I write a lot in the book about xenia, which is the Greek for the code of guest conduct, because of course the Greeks, when Odysseus and his men were traveling, there were no Airbnbs and hotels and 5-star ratings or whatever. You had to stay in people's houses and rely on their hospitality, and there was a code of conduct. So a stranger would be given the finest food, the finest drink. They would be often they'd be bathed by the house slaves, maybe given an oil massage, and only after they had eaten were they asked to tell their stories. And stories were really the kind of the currency that they gave back to their hosts.
Which is, makes a lot of sense, because this was, the Odyssey is obviously an oral story originally that people told. I've learned so much in the last, I feel like, month and a half, but that people told in sections. So travelers would sort of tell their favorite parts of the Odyssey story, after dinner and together. Talk a little bit more about the hospitality that you encountered. I know that Zeus's law comes up quite a bit in the film, and you felt like that's still alive and well.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's so much in this it's an incredible, obviously very anachronistic story, but very relevant to how we do hospitality rituals today in lots of ways. So there's a lot of feasting we talked about in the Odyssey. There's a lot of, good food and strong red wine, and that tradition, I think, is very alive and well through the Mediterranean. So I was constantly surprised at the generosity of strangers that I met along the road, who invited me to share a meal or have a coffee together, or shared their stories with me. And so there's a generosity of people, I think. And also the islands that I was visiting were all so small that actually, and of course it was off season, it was the winter time. So I was this sort of eccentric English girl, I guess, in town, and they were quite curious about what I was doing there.
So Laura, were you aware that you were writing a book? Had you decided that you were going to turn this Odyssey of yours into a sort of a travel memoir?
No, not really. Although I was journaling all the time when I was on the road, and I did have a file open in my computer called Ithaca, So I must have had some idea. But my father at the time was not very well, and he kept telling me to write. He kept telling me to write a book, and I kept saying, "Oh, I've never written a book. I don't know how to do it." And really with his encouragement, I ended up turning it into a proposal. And when you write a nonfiction book in the UK, you don't have to write the whole book. You write this sort of proposal, this pitch really of what you want to cover. And I sent it out to a bunch of agents and publishers and heard absolutely nothing for 6 months and kind of had given up. And then this woman, Debbie Chapman, sent me an email saying, "Is your manuscript still available?" And I kind of almost fell off my chair getting this email 6 months later, and said, yes, it's still available. And she ended up being my publisher at Summersdale, which is an imprint of Hachette. And it's an extraordinarily lucky thing. I think I was incredibly fortunate to be able to turn it into a book. And it's a book that traces my retracing of the Odyssey and the real islands that may or may not have inspired Homer and the different theories. It's a travel story of my journeys out there. And it's also, I talk about the poem at that particular point in time. So if I'm on Minorca, I'll talk about why it's associated with the Cyclops and what happens at that point in the story, what happens with the Cyclops. And he traps Odysseus and his men in his cave and then snacks on the crew. And of course, Odysseus famously drives a sharpened spear into his one eye, blinding him, and manages to escape by clinging to the back of the sheep. But it's also a story of the last year of my father's life. So it's got this joyful exploratory element, and then it's got a lot of sadness and anticipatory grief, because my father had cancer, and it was a terminal cancer. And it's called anticipatory grief when you know in advance that someone will die on some kind of a timeline, and it's a strange feeling. So those things are kind of braided together, and it was his hope that I would write this book, and it was a great good fortune to be able to do that, in his memory and in his honor.
And does your father pass away while you're writing the book, or does he get to see it? Does he get to read it?
He died just after my first ever travel article was published by The Guardian. So I got to read that article. At that point, he couldn't read, but he could listen. Gotcha. And so I read that out loud to him. So, I could see how proud he was that was in print, because that's what he'd kind of encouraged me to do. So he didn't see that he didn't live long enough to see the book, but he is the animating force, I guess, behind that book. I don't think I'd have written it without his kind of strong and repeated and sometimes very annoying encouragement to write it. And it does contain his death and how he died at home, which I think is a subject that we don't talk about enough in society. Is my dad was a doctor, and so he knew exactly what would happen to him, and he had an extraordinary palliative care team around him, and he died at home. And I've been very touched by readers who have written to me and said that kind of distillation of that chapter, of showing how that process unfolded, has helped them feel accompanied in their grief, and they see their same pattern in their own stories. So it feels quite profound in that way. But it's also a cheerful book and an uplifting book, and it's a book about how to live, and how to connect with strangers, and how to find joy and pleasure in these tiny things, in cold water swimming or climbing an amazing volcano, and discovering these extraordinary islands. The one thing I should say is it doesn't actually have any Greek islands in it, which I think has annoyed some readers. I didn't get to, I wanted to go to travel to some of the Greek islands, but I never made it. So they're not in the book. That is absolutely no slight on Greece. There's some beautiful islands in Greece. I absolutely know that. But I also think it's quite fun because it's sort of less obvious places. So Greece is so associated with the Odyssey. And I think people don't necessarily understand that ancient Greece, of course, stretched all the way across the Mediterranean. So it was, Odysseus, if we think about where he might have voyaged, goes all the way to the North African coast, for example. It's not just set in the modern day Greek archipelago. There's more and more islands associated with the Odyssey. I've just published a map, which is a modern day map of the real world today with the all the associations of the potentially mythological islands. And, there's places like Sardinia, there's places like Corsica. There's so many islands in the Med that claim this mythical heritage and claim this kind of magical ability to occupy the mythical world and the real world all at once. So there's a lot more traveling to be done, I think.
So if someone were to order the map, it's in the show notes, and they wanted to start sort of planning their own Odyssey, what would be some of your sort of practical recommendations?
Oh, well, I suppose I work as a travel writer as well, so I'm published in places like The Guardian, The Times, The Telegraph, and Marie Claire, and lots of places. And I suppose for me, I don't like to overly plan. I like a trip to unfold a little bit. So my one tip would be to kind of be blown by the winds a little bit. So you might want to plan how you're going to get to the first place, but leave some room in your trip for spontaneity, for serendipity to happen, for some of those more random encounters. And I suppose one of the things that I love about the Sicilian island hopping is that they're much smaller archipelagos and there's just very, very straightforward ferries. Whereas I think with Greek island hopping, it can be really challenging to work out routes and which islands you want to visit. So I've written before that I think the islands off the coast of Sicily are a really good alternative to Greek island hopping if you don't have much time, because they're very straightforward ferries.
That's super useful. It sounds incredible. I have spent time in Italy. I've never been to Greece. It's very high on my list, especially now. You traveled mostly solo for this, right? Do you have any thoughts about how to sort of travel solo and not get too lonely?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of solo travel because I think it allows for a deeper level of connection. So I think when you're by yourself, people will more so approach you, and particularly in the Mediterranean countries, I think if you're sitting in a cafe and like I do with a little coffee and maybe I'm handwriting in my journal or whatever, it's an invitation really to connect. And people just wander up and sort of say, "What are you doing? What are you writing about?" And it sort of sparks a whole conversation. And that conversation can very easily end up with a kind of a dinner invitation, or someone taking you on a walk to show you their favorite spot on the island, or some impromptu boat trip or something. And so I think that's a sort of, I guess the opposite of being on screens and hiding behind screens and having, headsets in all the time. Is just to sit there and kind of read a book or write, and be in a cafe and be open to just striking up conversation, I think. And there's also really good science that these weak links, I think they're called in social psychology, that they bring us so much happiness and so much connection. And I think that's sort of the bit around solo traveling that can be really uplifting, is that like unexpected connection you make, which turns into an extremely extraordinary adventure.
I'm a big solo traveler as well, and I find that just being open to experience the environment, not having your headphones in, not being on your screen is just a way to really connect with people. And I think that's great advice. Is there anything specific, traveling alone as a woman that worried you or that you learned?
Oh, I don't think so. I think there's a lot of fear around it, I suppose. I mean, obviously you need to be sensible, but and there are certain countries that I think are, if you are worried about it as a girl traveling by yourself, there's certain countries that are known to be safer. So I'm a big fan of Slovenia. It's not in the Odyssey, but it's a country that I think is perhaps lesser known and kind of flying beneath the radar a little bit, but it's sort of this kind of hidden Eden. It's sandwiched between Italy and Croatia, so it's really central in Europe, but people don't really know where it is on the map, and it gets confused with Slovakia, and it's got this kind of association with Eastern Europe and the Balkans, which I think's probably unhelpful. And it's actually very Central European in its ethos, and it's a really safe place. It's consistently ranked, I think, in one of the top 10 countries globally for solo travel. So you might want to look at some of the rankings and start with those safer countries if you're feeling nervous.
That's good advice. So the book is called Enchanted Islands, Travels Through Myth and Magic, Love and Loss. And the map is called The Odyssey, a mythical journey through the real world. We have links in the show notes for both. What are you working on next? Are you writing something that you're excited about?
I'm turning my hand to fiction, I think, next. So with non-fiction books, you have to be very careful. You have to have all these like legal disclaimers and make sure that people are comfortable. And I was writing about, my family and my best friends in the book, and you have to get like literally they all had to sign these like legal disclaimers. So I think I'm just going to play around with fiction, and I quite like how freeing that is to be able to kind of just make stuff up and not have to fact check anything. So I'm excited to be writing that.
And do you think it'll be a book that has to do with travel?
I don't think so, actually. I don't think so. So I'm writing, my travel stuff is, I write lots and lots of articles for different newspapers and magazines. I've got a piece coming out, forthcoming in Condé Nast's November issue. And so I tend to write when I travel now, I tend to turn it into articles. And so I think I need to almost do the opposite, which is kind of maybe write about London a little bit and write about home.
I am a huge Hollinghurst fan. I think he's probably my favorite contemporary British novelist. The Line of Beauty is probably one of my top 10 novels.
Line of Beauty is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. London is certainly plenty to write about there. Well, great. Is there a social media channel that folks can follow if they want to read more of your writing?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got Instagram. And I'll put that perhaps in the show notes as well for you. It's L_J_Coffey, which is COFFEY. Good, solid Irish name, slightly annoyingly spelt. So love anyone to connect with me there. I love hearing from readers. My most famous reader is Stephen Fry, who's endorsed the book as magical and captivating. So that was really a thrill because Stephen's such a classicist. So to have written something on the Odyssey as a non-classicist, that's not academic, that's deliberately accessible, and to have that kind of endorsement felt like a really full circle moment for me. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. Stephen Fry is on my list of, I think, would be one of the best dinner party guests.
Oh, I agree with you. He'd be a great dinner party guest.
Well, thank you so much, Laura, for coming on Out of Office. And all those links will be in the show notes. And now it's time for the last stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
All right. Wow. What an interview. So inspirational. And it makes me feel like you almost can't understand these stories without setting foot in some of these places. So thank you again to Laura. I mean, you've kind of given me a spot to check for. I mean, maybe this could be a next summer travel. We'll see. Go on my own Odyssey. But We're out of the interview here, Ryan. We're here in the last stop. This is the last segment of the show, the final segment of the show. That's why it's called the last stop. It's my favorite segment. It's your favorite segment. And it's popularly known as the people segment. That's why when you see people wearing that on hats, t-shirts, tattoos, that's what they're referring to here, the last stop. And it's the people segment. It's because we come together as an out-of-office community to share. Particularly you and I share. We each bring one thing each week. And it can be anything. It could be a story, a piece of gear. It could be a recommendation of an article or even an Instagram account. Could be another podcast. In this case, mine's going to be a podcast this week. It's a recommendation, but the main thing, Ryan, is that it must check one box. It must inspire the spirit of wanderlust within us, even during the workaday week. So, Ryan, I'm going to ask you, as I ask you every episode, do you have a last stop this week?
I do, Kieran. One of my goals, now spending time here in Colombia, is to get to see more stuff around the country. And there's this sort of quirky park that's an amusement park called Parque Jamie Duque. And Jamie Duque was a pilot for Avianca Airlines in the 1940s and 50s.
Mm-hmm.
And he traveled all around the world. In fact, in 1949, he piloted the very first ever Bogota to Rome flight. And back then it took 32 hours. And so he went all around the world as a pilot, and he retired in 1952 with around 11,000 flight hours. And he said to himself, wow, I've seen the world, and a lot of my countrymen, haven't had this opportunity. So in the 70s, he began constructing a theme park that was sort of patterned after Epcot. He was a huge fan of Walt Disney. He was inspired by, all the joy that he saw when he visited, some of these Disney parks. And so he built this sort of immersive destination about 45 minutes outside of Bogota, where people could come and see versions of some of the world's great wonders. And one of the things that's in the park that I'm most excited to see is a full-scale reproduction of the Taj Mahal.
What, a full scale?
A 1-to-1 reproduction of the Taj Mahal, 45 minutes outside of Bogota.
Is it like Epcot, where there's like a drinking game you can play as you go around the world to these landmarks?
I'm sure that there are some drinking games that will be played on this trip. Yes, I'm not the designated driver, thankfully, so I'll be able to enjoy that. But it also includes a zoo where they do a lot of work beyond just showing the animals, but with rescues and all that good stuff. Replicas of the seven wonders of the ancient world, a medieval castle, something about 1,001 Nights, and just a lot of other things about Colombian history. So it's gonna. I'm really interested to see it. I like quirky theme parks, and this is unique because it's just one guy's sort of vision for what he kind of wanted to bring to Colombia that he thought it was missing. So it's going to be an interesting trip. And then one of the cool things is years and years ago, Anthony Bourdain did an episode where he came to Bogota and he ate at he did one of those episodes where he ate at a few restaurants, etc. But this is like 13 years ago, so none of those places are around anymore. But the main
God, you're saying that to somebody in the restaurant business, Ryan. I don't love hearing that.
But one of the guys has opened up a new restaurant on the outskirts of Bogota. So we're going to visit that on the way back. So I might even do an episode on this because I think it's so interesting, and it sort of falls in with their sort of quirky day trip aesthetic. And so yeah, I'm excited about this trip, and it'll be, I've never been to the Taj Mahal, so I think maybe the 1-to-1 replica, I can fool some people on Facebook.
Wow. Well, I would look forward to full coverage of this. It sounds interesting enough. It might be worth an episode on its own if you think it merits it.
Yeah, definitely. It certainly would be interesting to talk about the history of theme park development, sort of post Disney. Yeah,
There's a
so
whole podcast that's about that I've listened to from time and again.
ooh, that's fun. That's fun. Did you bring a last stop this week, Karen?
I did, Ryan. So this week I'm going to recommend, it's a National Geographic podcast that is aimed at children. But I'm going to say, if you're not going to sit down and read the Odyssey and you need a refresher, this is a great resource. It's called Greeking Out. Greeking Out. And they tell mythological stories. They did a whole season where it was just Odyssey stories. And I mean, I listen to it endlessly with my children in the car, and I have learned a huge amount, or at least been reminded of a huge amount that I learned in, Western Civ many years ago. And so Greeking Out is a super accessible, fun way to brush up on your mythology before you head to the theater. And I would also say, I think you will find it interesting enough. You will crave listening to episodes outside of the Odyssey, because they do great voice acting, fun sound effects. And, it's not unscholarly. They really stick true to what the myths said.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. And if the adults are looking for a little brush up, one of my favorite podcasts, and I think one of yours, is The Rest Is History.
Oh, yeah.
With
That's going to be a little more scholarly.
Yeah, with Tom Holland, not that Tom Holland.
Sadly for Ryan.
Well, did you see that he had Tom on the show? He had Spider-Man
Oh no, I
Tom.
didn't see that.
And so they recreated that famous meme of the two Spider-Mans pointing at each other. The two Tom.
Oh
Hollands.
yeah. That's fun. That's clever.
So yeah, just a lot of great content around the Odyssey, and I'm glad today that we got to focus specifically on the real life travel aspects of it, because if the Odyssey is anything, it is a travel movie.
Yeah, it's mostly travel.
Have you seen Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Oh yeah, of course, I love that movie.
Yeah, that's
based on the Odyssey.
Yeah. So I'm in a very Odyssey frame of mind this week, and thank you so much, Laura, for coming on, and obviously link in the show notes to her book Enchanted Islands, and also she's in August she's publishing a big map that you can open and unroll that details the journey and sort of some of the real life places that you can visit. So
hopefully Catherine doesn't listen to this episode. That might be a Christmas gift.
Yes, she won't get this far.
that is almost for sure.
Well, Kieran, and until next time, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kieran Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken?
I do want to eat some of those lotus, though. I mean, it looked good. It looked good.